Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I extend a warm welcome to all at the 86th Talk of Indus Society weekly webinar series. At the very first, let me appreciate each one of the attendees for your interest in exploring the opportunities even during this pandemic situation through Indus Society weekly webinar series. This great venture, initiated by Indus Society, has been successfully coordinated for the past 85 talks with honored speakers. And today is not an exception. On behalf of all the attendees gathered here, with utmost honor and privilege, I welcome renowned signature of the team, Professor K. Vijana Kunju, PhD of TKM College of Engineering, to the 86th Talk of Indus Society weekly webinar series. Welcome you, ma'am. Much delighted. I welcome Chair of Indus Society Activities Committee, Kerala Section, Dr. Harindlal Sir, to the event. Welcome you, sir. Next, I would like to welcome all the organization committees and office bearers to this section. Welcome all. With immense pleasure, next I would like to welcome volunteers of today's section, Naurin, Rushida, Sumaya, Adla, to this section. Welcome all. Once again, my cordial welcome to all to the 86th Talk of Indus Society weekly webinar series. Wishing all an insightful and fruitful webinar experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosmi. Now, I invite Ms. Sumaya, IEEE volunteer, to introduce our speaker.
Rashida, Sumaya is not seen. You can please take a role and introduce the speaker, please.
Okay, sir. Sir, can I continue?
Go ahead.
So the wait is over. Now, let us synchronize our attention towards our esteemed speaker, Professor K. Bijuna Kunyu. Ma'am, the platform is all yours.
Good evening. Good evening, the esteemed audience that I see before me. I'm actually seeing a lot of our own gurus with VKD sir and Chandra Mohan sir. I'm not going to say something new to any of you. What I'm trying to tell you is to put forward how we are actually looking at things now. So some of the aspects which we should think more in the current situation is what I have taken, where we have to look at ACTC homes and the corresponding the three aspects of resilience, sustainability, and safety. Can I share? Thank you.
Now you can share, please.
Okay, so basically when we started learning electrical engineering, all of us had started learning with the aspect of looking at the AC systems being used at homes. So right now we have several options. So I'm just putting an outline where I'm trying to say that what are the different types of homes that we can have. And then the three aspects that we are talking about, the resilience, the sustainability, and the safety. And then I'm trying to say, what is the path forward that we are trying to look at in these three aspects put together? So there is nothing new in the talk, just putting in some thoughts which we as electrical engineers are facing in the current situation. So to start with the homes, every home that we have, including the commercials and industries, in the beginning of, say, from 1900 onwards, except for what Edison had tried out with his experiments in the laboratories, all other practical aspects, we had the system set up using AC. So we have AC source, we have AC transmission, we have AC loads as equipments at home, everything was AC. But now we can have something very simple, which looks like this itself. You just have to have a DC system, wherein you can have a solar panel. You need to have a DC to DC converter with a MPPT control, and then you need a battery, and just connect all your loads to it. So this can be the most simple way of giving supply to us home, where you can have your own source, your own storage equipment, and then you can supply your load. This is the simplest way of having things at home with the DC alone. So there are a lot of people who advocate this also. You might have heard a lot about our Ashok Jhunjhunwala at Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala at IIT Madras. They have actually set up a whole building with purely DC. Now this is the terminology that has come up recently, and it is some simplest way of doing it, because it has a reduced losses. And naturally, solar panel, because it has become very cheap compared to what we had earlier, the availability of the solar power from our sun is abundant enough for us to sustain, especially to our side of the continent. We can sustain. This has become one of the very good one of the very good options for people. So, and but there are shortcomings. Why people are not going into DC? Because earlier, all the equipments that we had discovered or have been using at home are adapted to AC. So to change over and retrofit, it is difficult. So retrofitting, as long as that is difficult, the changeover becomes difficult. It's similar to what we say for electric vehicles also, retrofitting from our usual hydrocarbon or the other fossil fuel engines to EV. Similarly, this changeover from an AC system to DC system, retrofitting will take some time. So in the meantime, what has happened is people are actually looking at a system where we have both AC and DC at home. This is a practical state which I would put as in between from the AC system. While without going into a purely DC system, we can have something like this. The advantage is that the AC loads which we already use, that can be supplied from the grid or can be supplied from, 1 second, we have a train, the Kollam train, which always interrupts like this. So the AC supply which goes to supply our AC loads, while the solar PV can supply the power to be stored in the battery and then supply the DC loads also. So this is something which is being developed more and more currently, because this is in between the two states. So what I want to tell you is, whether it is easy AC system, whether it is a DC system, or whether it is a combination of the two, the three aspects that we should look at are the resilience, the sustainability, and the safety. So going to those. Now, basically, I remember whenever we used to talk with our stalwarts, especially in our Kerala section, whenever we talk to VKD sir or Chandramohan sir and all the experts in our PES, we always think about the climate change and the climate, how is it going to be affecting us? And this has been a hot discussion and debate also for quite some time. But how long have we I think the number of days or number of hours that we have spent on discussion, the hours of research that we should put into has not gone into that much. But still, we have to take the same statement to the next generation and say that, yeah, you have to look at only this. Because as we know, the climate is changing, the weather effect is changing, and these two are actually affecting every part of the power system. The generation side, as we know, unless and until we don't get rain, the hydroelectric system won't work. If the solar power is not there, your solar power output will not be there. And if happened, if there is a flood that gets disrupted. On the other hand, the climate is going to affect the demand pattern as such. What are the loads that they are going to switch on? So every single aspect of power generation to the distribution or actual consumption of power, our climate, our weather is affecting us. So basically, because of them, this has become a major topic of concern, the resilient energy systems. Now, whatever I have taken is only from the publicly available sources. Nothing is taken from anywhere else. It's all publicly available documents. So you can also refer to all those things. So we talk about resilient energy systems. I was also telling my colleagues one day, like the resilience, the term resilience was not at all discussed when we were actually in the learning stage, because we did not think that this resilience is going to be so important. It is going to be so significant for a power system engineer, basically because the capacity of any system which has to overcome, which has to resist, which has to reduce the minimum or internal and external pressures. We never thought that the resilience of an energy system should be discussed in so detailed when we were actually thinking only about the technical aspects. We remember when we did the power systems learning, we were learning about the actual technology, its analysis, its optimization, so many things. But the least looked upon point was always the resilience. Now, what we are trying to say in a resilient energy system is that the system should have its own capacity to tolerate the disturbance and to continue to deliver affordable energy service. So the question is it reliability? No, reliability is the continuity of supply and the frequency of supply that is being given to the consumer. But resilience is the capacity to tolerate the distance and then continue to deliver affordable energy service. And the capacity is actually measured by how fast can you recover from the shock, how fast you can recover from the shocks and provide the alternate energy means. So this resilience, I think when this resilience part has been more effectively discussed and carried out by people like those who are in Japan, who have been succumbing to so many such shocks, massive shocks like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. From there, they have come back to the normal state, and the speed at which they recover is something that we have to look at as one of the tactics of resilience systems. So that resilience, what are the resilience should be against? We are saying that it should be against the technical equipment failure. It should be against the temporary disabling of energy service due to disaster. It can be the volatility of power, the increasing energy cost, the demand and supply fluctuations, disruption, anything that comes up is that which affects the resilience. The technical equipment failure, we know the generating station, sometimes one equipment can be tripping, one of the major transmission line tripping. Naturally, we'll get an unplanned outage. So the unplanned outage will certainly lead to the disruption. Then temporary disabling due to a disaster, like what happens, maybe a heavy rain, one main supply transmission line gets stripped up due to a tree falling on it. Then the price volatility, this is coming as important because the price volatility is something that is going to rule the energy supply system as such. Depending on the price, People are going to use the power, people are going to sell the power. So the price volatility is going to affect the power flow. Then, and because of the same, the price volatility, the energy cost also, as we know that earlier in the what do you say, until 2003, I should say, before the Electricity Act that came in, until 2003, we were always looking at energy or power or electricity power as a service. Beyond 2003, we are actually looking at it as a commodity. And as long as we sell as a commodity, naturally, nobody ensures social justice. Nobody ensures social justice. So that is where the energy volatility is going to come, the increasing energy cost is to come, and then the demand and supply fluctuation will be there. Whether it is planned or unplanned, it will be there. And then the energy disruption is going to happen, right? So then this pinpointing the areas, like where it is going to come up with, etc., etc. So there, no, sorry. The primary energy supply resource, where we are going to look at the resilience, need only two possibilities are there, the availability and the cost. Now, why the availability? Naturally, because of the source, or maybe because of whether the unit is ready for generation. And we give the name as the economically available, or for the unit commitment availability, etc., etc. That we used to learn in the beginning. But the cost part, naturally, some of the units will not be used during a particular interval. Now the next slot, next interval, some other combination will be coming in. So basically the primary energy source or resource will be changing from point to point or interval to interval. So this being happening, the vulnerability is there. Another possible option is that the transformation or storage or transmission be between the point to point, what we say, from the generating side to the customer, we need a transmission and distribution side. Now, in between, no, that also very easily affected by the weather conditions, can be affected. And another storage is another point which is coming up right now. Now, why the storage is important is now, because of this same problem of improving the reliability, improving the resilience, etc., people have started to use storage systems also. In fact, utility scale storage systems are there, not just the storage at our own, maybe at our own generating stations or a smaller station. No, utility stage storage systems are available, which is available not even outside, it is available in India also. And now our utilities have started for bidding for such utility scale storage systems. So they are trying to give us the power when in certain situations it may not be available also. So especially the weather is one of the factors which can lead to the vulnerable situation. So transmission, distribution, and so the disruption to the supply and the fluctuation in prices can happen at the end of the consumer, or at the consumer end rather. Now the vulnerabilities of the storage and transmission technologies or generation to start with. So one example is each plant, if you look at, like wind power, we know it is geographical distribution and the variability of wind speed is main problem. Then hydropower, changing hydrological cycle. That is what we are experiencing right now. We always used to have a rainy season, sunny season, and so on. But now what we are facing is what we used to talk about for so many decades before also, but now we are facing it. Now we cannot predict. If you have a sunny day in the morning, in the afternoon, the whole system is changing. And now we cannot say that this is a rainy season from June to July, you have rain. And then from July to October, you have sun. Then October to say November, you have rain. You cannot predict. So that is what is changing hydrological cycle. Then the biofuels that we keep on depending on. The effect of climate change is going to affect on all of them. And even when we say biofuels availability, where it is available, whether it is available. So availability is a major factor, and the vulnerability of such a factor is going to affect us more. And one aspect we all fall into and depend on now is the solar. And the solar, as we know, it is one of the major thing which we depend and is viable to changes in many aspects, basically because of the atmospheric vapor content, the estimate that we make as a power output from a solar plant, so it may fall short of the availability. So in such a case, the total system itself will not be sufficient to give us the power for. So as such, the vulnerabilities of generation technologies are this. Whereas the storage and transmission technologies, these are well-known events like power lines we have in between the source and the sinking or the generation and the consumer end. And we say extreme winds, any ice loading, lightning, all these are factors which we have been looking at ever since we started learning with power systems, right? Flooding. And the major problem that we are facing now is that the frequency of all these has increased. Whether it is extreme wind, ice load, anyway, to this side it is not there, but to the other sides, the ice loading is also going up. The lightning strikes every now and then it comes. The conductor vibrations and galloping, that is also there in between. Avalanche, even if we don't say it, we are saying it where it is quite common. Then the landslides. And for Kerala, the landslides are now becoming a very, very, very frequent incident. Then comes the flooding, which we are facing yearly and in the year itself several times, and the wildfires. So looking at this aspect, actually the vulnerability of resilience sustaining throughout the world, technology has become a challenge for all of us. The gas transmission systems are also there, which I'm not going to talk into details. Well, whereas the demand side, actually the global warming is a major part. If you remember, I don't know whether our generations, as we change from one generation to the other, in the childhood, I still remember we used to sit outside at in the evening also without a fan, because we never felt that there is a requirement for a fan. But now the generation of ours, our children cannot sit without a fan outside. They cannot sustain without an air conditioner. So the demand side vulnerability will be affecting mainly because of the global warming. Then the transportation side, because we need more of the cooling load, use of air conditioning reduces the efficiency. And the mobility side was also there, which I forgot to put it in there. So these are the vulnerabilities that is going to affect the resilience as at all. Now, how can we enhance the resilience? This is what we all look at. So basically, we are trying to see that the resiliency can be improved by three things. One, prevent the damage naturally. Then the second one is the system recovery as early as possible, and then survivability by means of recovering as soon as this, and to make it survive the accidents as such. So the designing standards and siting, this is something that we keep on saying, designing standards and siting. The major problem that we feel that is missing in our own systems is that this is where we make a compromise with. We keep on making compromises in the design standards and siting. That is where we have to tighten ourselves. And when we go to the construction, the maintenance, the inspection, the operating practices, the security, everywhere we make a compromise. Everywhere we make a compromise. So because of those compromises on design standards, the constructional, features or the selection of materials, how it is being done, regular maintenance, regular inspection, are they using the or actually following the operating practices, ensuring that they are following, ensuring the security. This is where we are not more keen upon, and I think this is where we have so many things to be done. The damage prevention or hardening the standards, while the other one, the system recovery, well, the damage assessment as early as possible is what we mean. But if you look at the actual practice that is being done, if a damage is happening, you take years. You take years to assess the damage. Then how to manage, time limit is not a problem at all, because I have seen the systems, how it goes on. If something is gone, and to recollect and recover the whole system, the time that is being taken, there are difficulties. Naturally, there are difficulties, but the time that you take in doing all this, we need to have our own stringent standards, without which the system recovery will be taking its own time. While the survivability, this is something that we don't even consider, the basic level of service. Are we more bothered about all this? Are we more bothered about whether the communication is proper or not? Is the urgent service being done? So basically, some new business model is what the technologies, or those who are actually doing the research in this area, what they are suggesting is to have such new business models. But we are skeptical about such business models also, because we know in such business models, when it goes about business models, where it is going to go to, the system as such will go to people, which we don't know what will happen in the future. So what the indications of energy system resilience we have, these are the points actually given by the people who are doing the research in the resilience part itself. So they are saying the preparedness and planning is what is more important, and then the recovery and rebuilding is what we should go ahead with. So the improved resistance and resilience of energy systems is points like microgrids or building islanding, then plan for secure, sustainable, safe communities, policies and codes that support all of them, and then the deploying on-site demonstrations, how to recover emergency backup power. If that practice or preparedness is what they are all telling about. So that is what we are talking here, preparing for natural disasters. I think our people have now become very well prepared for at least one disaster, where we actually have to have a plan, then organize and train, then exercise, and then evaluate. This is something that we always do. The risk assessment, and then the emergency exercise, and grid resilience. Grid resilience is what we are more bothered about, or we talk more about in grid resilience, because that is what affects a lot of people. So policies, they have the hazard maps prominent to the damage, and then the zone, putting them into zones. I am sure that all our system planning part, this they already have something in their responsibility of doing this. If it is only the utility people, and say that they are the only people who have to bring it back, that is where we have a problem with. So that is where the preparedness should actually go from the utility side or the supply authority side to the people who are actually using also. So some of the technology part which has come up in getting such things done is being just shown. This is something that is being practiced elsewhere, where they have the emergency exercises and the community mobilization. That is what we are trying to say. It is community mobilization, not the responsibility does not lie upon the only the utility people. We are also responsible. We are as community, we should also be ready to put in our service and bring ourselves into such situations where we can do the support as far as possible. So simulation of the outages, funding provision, these are actually how it is being done professionally outside, where they have a community bringing in whenever there is such requirement. So facile community consultation and consensus building, these are all possible when I think the best platform where this is possible is what we do right now, where we have a professional organization like IEEE or Institution of Engineers, or even because we need everyone, we need the communication team also into, and the computer systems also. So all sorts of those societies who can bring in a lot of things, because we have seen when there is some disaster, we have seen that all these sectors have a role to play. So I think the community mobilization is what, and the point where we end up with as power system engineers always is the grid resilience. We want a smarter grid, we want a reinforced grid, then with the distributed generation and microgrids and resilient demand. This is something that we try to say. A grid resilience, these are the points, but we want a smarter grid. It's so as we say, it is a smarter grid. It is not just the material, it is not just a connection. It involves communication, it involves security, it involves computing. So all part of technology is involved in setting up a smarter grid. And as I said, as it is given, the reinforcing the grid with a higher design standards is what we have been pointing out. And facilitating or incorporating more of the distributed generation and microgrids, and to have the demand side also resilient. This is something that we can practice in our daily life itself, so that everyone becomes known and everyone starts practicing this. So enhancing resilience as such, there are so many things that has been done everywhere, and I've just put in one of the I've just put in the pictures just to show how they are actually using the hydrophobic coating in order to avoid the water particles damaging the system. Then we have the monitoring equipment running on the system to sense the fault also, and see the image that particular camera is also giving. So these are things which has been already practicing, which probably will come into practice with us also, like targeted undergrounding, and wherever we require, we go for the undergrounding, and then uninterrupted or unmanned aerial view, we can have some robots, or even the going for looking at how it is being done, and the damage assessment, which we had started with the practicing, but we may be requiring them more and more in the future. So from the customer side, whatever we said earlier, were on the either the generating side or on the transmission side, do we have to require the enhancing resilience part on the customer side also? We need, right? So basically, something that we are now upon is this, using the photovoltaics as a power source. Then community energy storage is what we have not started practicing of. Rather, we keep on saying grids. We talk about connecting several houses together. We have to have something like this also, where we can have a community energy storage. And the major difference, or why we are not thinking about it, basically, I think because we are a much more connected system, where we don't see a barrier between districts or barrier between town and village. We don't see it something like that. We have a completely connected system. But if you go just move out of Kerala, we can see such what is small pockets. And these small pockets are much higher in number in continents where the total population is less. So there they actually practice this. I remember several stories our VKT sir used to talk about when he was talking about either the Kenyan African country case or the mostly from Africa. He used to say such things. So they have been practicing this. And we want to have the same practice and use PV systems as a backup for improving the resilience. Now we need the control devices also. When we have such photovoltaics and storage coming up, and with them as backup, we need more sophisticated control also. So when the grid power is low, we want the load to be automatically curtailed to balance. So this can be done. This can be done. So people, I think our students, if you look at as a teacher, I'm saying that our students, if you tell them that this is to be done, they said it's possible. It's so easily. It can be easily done. But when you try to practice the same in a practical case, that is where the the glitch is coming in between. So I think our practicing people and the new generation who is going to spread up the lights of technology into the new future. The new generation should actually be consuming more and more of all these aspects, and maybe practically we'll have a much resilient system. Basically, the new generation is also demanding more of the resilient system. So if they are resilient, hopefully our new generation in another few years ahead, the few will be as small as possible. I would request them also to do the research and do the actual practice, not the research. It is more on the practicing side. The point that they may not be much interested in this is the sustainable energy system, because when we talk about sustainable, everybody keeps on saying that yes, sustainable energy is something that we are doing, right? We are saying we are trying to endure the hold or bear or carry whatever it is. We are trying to sustain our energy system, and basically to sustain again the option goes back. Whatever energy resources is, that are available, we try to make use of them and make the system more sustainable. So integrating lower energy requirements or increasing more of the smaller energy sources available, we try to make energy system sustainable in the sense if one is gone, the other should be there, right? So sustainable energy resources, we keep on saying that it has increased. The growth of renewables, has become much more, 45% larger in 2020 compared to, it's just a year. This is the data that we have got from public resource itself. If in 1 year it can increase so much, naturally it's going to increase the pace. With the solar energy, the PV panels getting reduced in cost, the smarter grids are coming up with more good equipments which can be controlled are coming up. Naturally, we will have much more sustainable energy resources. The third aspect that we were trying out, the electrical accidents. This is where, in fact, when I was asked to take the point of what are you going to talk about, the topic for the day, this is the first point that I wanted to talk about, basically because of one major accident that happened and took away the lives of two of our very good students. The accident naturally possible everywhere, right? So when we look at the number of electrical accidents that has occurred, that is what is alarming. This is the number actually available with our inspectorate. This is the data given by electrical inspectorate. This is an alarming number. See the accidents that has happened. Do you think that it is only on the KSCB side, total accidents relating to KFCB? You can actually look at this number. This is the column for a KFCB. Look at what has happened in domestic premises. right? The only difference between them is that the fatality has been reduced. While then this number, see, non-fatal accidents, here it is 13, here it is 134, but the fatal accidents, you can see comparable number. Here it is more. The fatal accidents, here it is more. So it is not just the KSEB accidents which we are facing now. It is the safety practices that we are not looking at. I was when I was actually talking to the inspectorate people, they were telling us one particular case where there was a fire inside a home because of short circuit. And when they went for examination at that house, they were saying that it was he was an electrician himself. So when a person knows how to do things, he just kept on adding wires, making circuits, and the whole roof was of GI sheet. And this GI sheet, naturally, when the rain comes, that gets rusted. At some point, this was broken. The wire also, it was rubbing across the sheet, and the insulation went off. And one day, the person was the lady of the house. She came out of the bathroom with the wet. Her she did not have a chapel yet, and she stepped on the floor, and she caught the trying to hang the clothes. It was not a wire conductor, metal. It was a metal wire. So this was touching the whole house. Naturally, not just that person, along with her, the whole family in that house got electrocuted. So I think the training that we as engineers, as electrical engineers, we need to spend a lot of time in training our own people, even if we know that even the electricians, they have made such a big mistake. So the operating practices, the safety practices is something that we need to practice in our own life, not just in pakka houses or good houses. We need to spend a lot of time in training the people on practicing safety standards. There's another number which I have taken. Again, you can look at what has happened. Other than the KSCB, also the consumers premises, the number, it's an alarming number, quite an alarming number. So I think as electrical engineers, our role comes in there. Not just electrical, I would say any engineer who knows what will happen in such a case should actually spend some time in training our own people to prevent such accidents. Most of the time, the accidents is caused due to negligence, and sometimes the negligence is fatal. So the safety practices that we should follow up is something that is more important, and that is to be immediately taken up as one of the agenda in any programs that we go on. So the question comes, what is more important? Well, people always say that in the planning phase, these are all what has been obtained from people who are doing it. They say that the sustainable energy resources and resilient systems, then safety precautions. Naturally, because what are the sources, resources, inputs that we have, that is more important. To maintain the input, that is the second important thing. So that is why the resilience comes. Then comes the safety precautions. What are the precautions that you should have to ensure that the power is actually available continuously without a break, without making any damage to the user, with all the precautions. So in the planning phase, we naturally take sustainable energy resources development as the first priority, then finding its resilience is second priority, and then the safety precautions. But while it comes to the operating phase, while we actually live our own life, naturally safety should be our first preference. Then comes resilience, and third, the sustainability. And when we actually look at the cost of investment, if you look at, and in the sense, the consumer side, the naturally for a person with sufficient investment possible, for him, maybe high investment investing people, they may be more looking at or spending more on sustainability, less on resilience, and much less on resilience and then on the sustainability. Now, unless and until operating personnel, it should be everyone who is in contact with electricity, they should be trained that safety first. So I think that is what I have to say regarding the three aspects that I have talked about. Basically, because we as engineers, how should we go ahead with our own engineering professional practices, what I wanted to tell you. And I repeat my own operational strategy in priority as to have safety first. That is all I have to say. Thank you. Shall I stop sharing?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. I don't know how you found, but we can go for any discussions because I know all of you are very learned fellows. I'm seeing my own teachers also in front of me.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful session. It was great listening to you. We have some queries in the chat box. If you have more further queries, do post them in the chat box. So, sir, so ma'am, it will be very kind of you if you could respond to those. Shall I read them to you, ma'am?
Yeah. So, yeah, the first question is in Kerala, my observation is that our KSCB's resilience capability is not that good. If power failures take place, I desire to know the views of professor in this aspect. Our system need a lot of improvements. Oh, the question went on. Need a lot of improvements. Our engineers handling the power supply problems need. Actually, sir, the KSCB as such, if you look at with their machinery, the number of people and what they can do, the maximum they can do is what they are doing. But the whole system needs, what to say, needs a new outlook as such. They are actually changing. There are a lot of changes that are happening. I have seen from my own views. Actually, I have been working with KSCB whenever there is some disaster, we have been with them. How so we cannot question their dedication at all. They are doing it. Meaning, as you said, they are trained. That is what we have to see. What I have seen is that they have trained. They have been trained and they do it. But the problem is when an accident occurs, when an accident occurs, it is not the KSCB people who are facing it. So that is where I keep on telling the training is important for everyone. While the resilience part, I have seen that the resilience, they are trying their maximum. That is what I have seen. But the problem mainly comes is in our own state, as you know, if they have to do something, most of the time things have to come from outside, and so they will be depending more on the availability of materials from outside. So sometimes it takes time, but the earlier is their principle now. So that I have seen, they have actually changed a lot because of what they are going through, like what we are going through, they are also going through. So they have trained, and our engineers are handling it. Even the KSCB personals are handling it, right from the lineman, they are doing it. But we need to look at the resilience and what to say, capability to face the resilience for our own people. That is what I feel. Okay.
അതല്ലല്ലോ നമ്മൾ കേൾക്കാൻ വന്നത്. അതന്നെ പറഞ്ഞത് ACDC ഹോംസ്, അതല്ലേ ഞാൻ ചാടിക്കറി വന്നത്. ACDC ഹോംസിനെ പറ്റി ഒന്നും പറഞ്ഞില്ല, ഒരു പടം മാത്രം കാണിച്ചു.
ഹലോ. The accidents alarming since decades ago, but nowadays also. Can you repeat the question, Arun? Because it's too long, I don't see that. The accidents alarming since decades ago, but nowadays also we hear the same. We have a great automation system. Yes. Sir, the automation systems are there, but who are using those automation systems? Those who are using the automation systems, they have a safe operation that is there. But we are not using such operating systems or automated. The number of places where we use the automation systems are improving. That is there. The possible relative advantage of actually the resilience will improve, and the stability and safety aspects are also better with DC systems. The only thing that we have as a barrier in between is that the availability of DC equipments, more or less, whatever equipments that we are used to, they are not readily available in DC. Because earlier, right from the beginning, our AC systems have been using, so all the equipments that has been designed are designed for AC. But many of the other systems which can be made use of in DC, they are actually changing over. So as more and more people may adopt to the DC systems, I think the DC systems is going to come up more, because actually they are good at in resilience as well as sustainability. And the safety aspect, if we keep the safety aspect is more important while doing the DC, that can be easily implemented. That is what I have seen. So practically it is possible, but it is the changeover time that is taking now, which from the AC to the DC, we are actually changing over. Collect the statistics on the fatal and non-fatal accident. Not KSCB, sir. It is actually available with the inspectorate. All the accidents data are available with our electrical inspectorate. It is a publicly available document. You can just refer there.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Time is up.
Yeah.
We are into the session.
There are so many questions. Can you should be provision for turning of the supply of the conductor is snapped? Is there any proposal? Yeah, so many people, so many suggestions have come up, and they are actually implementing some of the conductor snapping problem is actually done. But as we know, the distribution system, we know thousands of kilometers are there. So the reach of those systems to every point, it will take some time. So the delay in between is what is more important. And I think the planning phase in KSCB, they have actually done to avoid even the unprotected area. That part is being removed right now. So they're practicing how to protect even the last bit of the line that is being coming up right from the current conductor snapping. So the other part, and will use codes are being developed, sir. Actually, system codes are being developed involving CDAC, and also many other agencies are involved in that, in developing the standards for DC and the codes also for DC. It's coming up. Is there anything that I should look at? Any particular question that I should answer, because otherwise I cannot see.
No, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really a great interactive session. Now, I'd like to invite Ms. Adla, IEEE volunteer, to deliver a word of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, Adla.
A warm good evening to one and all. It is my indeed privilege to say the word of thanks for this session. First of all, I would like to thank our chief guest, Professor Bijuna Kunyu, HOD of Electrical and Electronics Department at Tikkim College of Engineering. Thank you, ma'am. Your talk was really wonderful and informative. Then I would like to thank our Harindra Lal sir for conducting all the event. Then I would like to thank all the volunteers who are really supported for the conducting this talk. Last but not least, I would like to thank all the attendees present here. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Adla. As we have come to an end of this session successfully, I would like to announce the next session in our Intersociety weekly webinar series. That is on next Wednesday, 8th December, we will have our 87th talk series with Professor George Irumpan, Senior Consultant, Broadcast Engineering Consultant in India Limited, about digital broadcasting in radio and television. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., attendees kindly take a note on that and register for the session. Hope to see you all on the next Wednesday. On behalf of IWWS team, thank you from bottom of my heart for joining with us today on the 86 talk. Goodbye, and this is